First of all, so happy to be here. Super excited to talk a bit about how we at EQT and mainly our FP&A team leverage Anaplan, especially in the kind of decision-making area. Um, yes, so my topic is driving high-performance decision-making at EQT, the FP&A, using Anaplan. And I just want to start to talk a bit about what is EQT and what do we do. So EQT is a private equity firm, and we like to view ourselves as a purpose-driven investment organization. We really like to work actively with the companies that we own in our funds. And, our purpose is really to future-proof companies and make a positive impact for all. For all means, for the portfolio company itself. It means for our investors, of course. It means for the world, for the planet, but of course also for us and our shareholders. Our vision is to be the most reputable investor and owner of the portfolio companies. And, private equity, it's actually quite simple if you take a step back. We collect monies from our investors. We put this money into a fund in a certain strategy. We buy portfolio companies, we hold them, we actively manage them for a certain period of time, usually about 6-7 years. We sell the company, hopefully at a profit, and we can return money to our investors. A few stats about us. So today we're about 2,000 employees. We're a global organization, so we have offices all over the world. We have about 1,300 clients. Also, again, come from all over the world. It is ranging from, institutional investors to private individuals and large corporations. In our funds, we own about 300 portfolio companies. And in our real estate funds, we own more than 2,000 buildings. So quite a big firm, actually. And I think the latest asset under management number, which is basically how much money do we manage at the moment, is about 270 billion euros. So a lot of money. And I think it's really, really excited to be part of this. I think the next slide is quite telling about the EQT journey. And it looked like this. So EQT is a Swedish-based firm. We founded in 1994 here in Stockholm. And in the beginning, it was very much focused on the private capital business. It was focused in the Nordics. We raised our first fund in 1995. And then you can see we slowly expanded. We raised more money. The funds got bigger and bigger. And we started to expand to all of Europe. And then in 2008, we launched our infrastructure business. So going from a purely private capital business to also investing in infrastructure. And then, of course, something happened around 18, 19, and especially 2020, the IPO. And since then, we've just seen a massive exponential growth. In 2021, we acquired an American real estate firm called Exeter, now named as EQT Real Estate. And then in 2022, we acquired an Asian private capital firm. So we really, expand our businesses through acquisitions. And these are just the two biggest ones. We made a bunch of others as well. And as you can imagine, this creates quite a few challenges for an FP&A team. We need to manage more capital, more people, but also just different ways of doing things. When EQT was small, it was quite simple because we had control. It was mainly Sweden-based. Yes, we had offices all over the world, but it was still mainly focused on Sweden, which means that it was quite simple to do the budget and the forecasting processes. But now all of a sudden we have new businesses doing things in a completely different way, having different compensation structures. We get funds that are completely different from what we've launched at EQT. So the business just grows, and with the growth also comes increased complexity. And I think when it comes to decision making from an FP&A perspective, the main tool that we have to use is the budget and forecast process, mainly the budget. So my talk now is going to be quite focused on the budget process and how we use that to control the business and, of course, make better decisions. So where are we kind of coming from? So this is about 3 years ago when I joined EQT. Previously, I worked at Deloitte. Super happy to see some old colleagues here today. And that's really where my Anaplan journey started. So I've been working with Anaplan in a few different ways for about 7 years now. So I would say I know it quite well. And it's been anything from a hands-on model builder to being in a more digital transformation role within the FP&A team as I am now. So I've kind of seen both sides, both the developer side, the consulting side, but also the end user side. And when I joined EQT 3 years ago, our budgeting process was basically purely Excel based. I mean, that works fine, but it also creates some challenges. And some of these challenges were the following. So we were kind of really struggling with, if we start at the top left, the data. Data is, always an issue for most organizations, and hopefully some of you guys recognize that. And I think that we knew the data was available somewhere in the organization. You just needed to know who to talk to. And it was really hard to find a way to share it with everyone. We also had a bunch of Excel files, as I mentioned. We are divided in a way that different people have a responsibility for different business lines within the organization. And, every business line had their own Excel files. And someone built this Excel file at some point. That person might have left or forgot why they did things a certain way. So you had all of these legacy files, which are super important to make the business run, but no one really knows how it works. And I see some people smiling, and I think that's good, because that means we weren't the only one that were in this situation. We were also, struggling with alignment in these files. How do you know the private capital Excel file and the infrastructure Excel file are using the same logic? How do you know they're using the same assumptions? Well, you don't, unless you really talk to each other. And I mean, things change. Someone hears something in the corridor, someone updates one file, don't know if you updated the other file. So there was just a kind of lack of alignment between all this. And of course, with Excel also comes collaboration challenges. Of course, you can collaborate in Excel. You can have SharePoint, you can have OneDrive, etc. But it's still not really a collaborative, friendly tool. It works, but it's definitely challenging. And then I think one of the main challenges for us at EQT and the FP&A team was the transparency challenges. So we basically had a setup where HR were responsible for the workforce planning, where the business line controllers sitting in the business responsible for the forecast of the revenues from the fund. And FP&A basically got the output. That's fine, but we couldn't really answer any questions about details. We were just given the output, and we didn't have the details to be able to do the analysis that we wanted to. And then, of course, when it comes to scenario planning, we had it, but as you know, you take a copy of the Excel file, you change the assumptions, and then all of a sudden you have two Excel files. How do you know you update both of them? And it was also super reactive. So it was more like when we got a question to do an analysis, we did it, but we weren't proactive at all. And, all of this are quite big challenges. And it meant that we felt that we really needed change. So why did we need change? So first of all, as I mentioned, we're quite a few businesses, both in Asia, US, and Europe. And with that comes, as I mentioned again, new compensation structures, new bonus models, new, acquisition bonuses for real estate business, and all of these stuff, which our existing workforce planning tool just couldn't cater for. So we spent a lot of time looking for a tool that could fit us and could fit the way we do our business and the way we wanted to plan at EQT. We couldn't really find one, and that was a massive challenge for us. Next, we had a very, very siloed planning processes, as I mentioned. So the workforce planning was done like this. The revenue forecast was done like this. The overhead forecast was done like this. And no one really had the full picture. I mean, we added in our consolidation system, but then you didn't have the details, the underlying assumptions to why a certain number looked the way it did. And I think it's important to mention that EQT is a very decentralized and entrepreneurial organization with basically the business lines kind of doing their own things, which is, super good for our growth in the company on its whole, but it's also very, very challenging for FP&A. And we spent so much time just arguing about the baseline that we didn't have time to discuss the actual forecast. We could go into meetings and say, oh, right, so your current headcount in your team is 15. No, it's not, it's 12. And then we spent ages just discussing that, why the numbers didn't match, and instead of actually discussing things that would add business value. And of course, as with any Excel files, there's a massive risk of manual errors. You don't have it systemized. Anyone can change a formula. Yes, of course, you can protect it, but does people really do that? And you also have very, very sensitive data just flying around. In our case, compensation for individuals, but also exit forecast for portfolio companies and sometimes even listed portfolio companies. Obviously super sensitive and should not disable someone's local hardware. It should be systemized and only shared on a need-to-know basis. And then, as I mentioned, is scenario planning. It was very, very reactive, very, very manual, and, leading to slower business decision. Whenever we did a scenario analysis, it was always a matter of, taking the time. It could take hours and hours before you actually had a result. And, if you take this to the extreme, it basically means that we're losing money because we spend so much time just crunching numbers instead of actually analyzing it and doing what we do really good, which is, running the business. So we sat down, we had a chat in the FP&A team together with tech, where I was at the time, and we thought, how can we rethink this process? How can we just start from scratch? An ideal audit process for EQT, the way we are organized now and how we think we're going to be organized in the future. What would that look like? So we made a strategic decision to just redo everything, start from scratch, and try to do it customized to how we want it. And, spoiler alert, hence why I'm here, we choose to do that in Anaplan. So why did we choose Anaplan out of all the planning systems available? So I think one of the reasons was actually that we already had Anaplan in our company. So at the time, I've been with EQT for about 6 months or so. I've been working with Anaplan. We had a few, smaller use cases. We were running some small, almost like proof of concepts. We had some tailored models that were specific to funds, etc. But we never really scaled it and really, leveraged the full potential of Anaplan. So we already had it, and it was just easy to get up and running, do a proof of concept quite quickly to see if this is something that would suit us. Next up, as anyone using Anaplan knows, you got a really, really powerful calculation engine. It's super quick, and we heard earlier this morning about having, I don't know how many billion trillions of cells, and it just takes a few seconds. So the calculation engine is way more than we need, which is always nice. But you can also really cater for some advanced scenario modeling quite simply, actually, if you do it right from the beginning. And then, of course, it allows for collaboration in a few different ways. So, I think one of the main reasons why Anaplan is super collaborative is, yes, of course, you can comment and you can share stuff, etc. But you're looking at the same data. If I'm talking to someone and I talk about, a certain cost center or legal entity, whatever, as long as they are in Anaplan, we are looking at the same data. I don't have to share it in Slack or email. They just have to log on and we can collaborate in real time, which is, at least for me, that's a massive win. But I think the biggest one of all is the one to the bottom left. I think Anaplan allows for a analysis from a holistic perspective with aggregated data from multiple sources, not just financial data, any data related to the role as the CFO, or in our case, the FP&A function. And I think this is just, amazing. You can basically pull any data that you want, automatically, of course, into Anaplan. You can have it part of your planning process. You can really get, the integrated planning part, where it's not just, I'm looking at my cost or I'm looking at my revenues. It's the full spectrum of any data relevant to our planning process. And I think another, kind of gain to this is also that Anaplan is quite similar to Excel in many ways. It's very familiar for the end user interacting with Anaplan, which, at least in our case, made adoption much, much easier, especially if you talk about a function like HR that are not necessarily used to working in super advanced tech systems in the way that we in FP&A are. And I think Anaplan really sits in kind of the sweet spot in between being a business system like Excel and being a tech system, where it's more like, you enter a number, there's a thumb drive doing a thing, and then you get an output. In Anaplan, you can follow the numbers, you can drill down, you can see the formulas, and anyone who's used to working in Excel can kind of follow what's happening, which I think is a massive, massive gain. And then, of course, Anaplan is scalable. You can handle loads of data. You can grow with the business, especially if you integrate it with your remaining or your infrastructure, basically. So what does that mean? You have your list of cost centers. You have your list of legal entities, portfolio companies, funds, whatever. As long as the source systems are up to date, you know that the data you're looking at in Anaplan is always up to date. Yes, of course, you can do this in Excel as well, but here it's really systemized and it's controlled. You can set alerts for updates, etc., etc. So you can really, be comfortable that the data you're looking at is the latest and greatest. So what did we actually do? As I said, we took a step back and we started with the foundation. We started with the process, the data, and the responsibilities. So I think one of the main strengths about Anaplan is really that you can fit a system around the process. You don't need to take a process and kind of shoehorn it into a system. So you can really customize it to what your process looks like. But to be able to do that, of course, you need to know what you want your process to look like. So that's where we started. We started with redesigning the entire budgeting process and just thinking about how would we want to do it in an ideal world. And then, of course, everyone's favorite topic, data. Excuse my French, but crap in, crap out. It's always going to be like that. Unless you have good data going into your planning models, the outcome is never going to be good. And then, of course, responsibilities. Very closely tied to the process. Who's going to do what you want that to look like? What kind of access levels do you have? What, just the general setup, laying the foundation before moving on to actually starting building models. And being a private equity firm, about 70% of our costs are related to the workforce. So what we did, especially, as I mentioned, the challenges we had related to the workforce, we started off with building a workforce planning model. And we basically just thought about how can we automate as much as possible, and how can we just make sure that the existing business, but also potential future businesses, will be easy to adopt and just add into the model. So we can have one workforce planning model where we can feel comfortable with the forecast and the budget is doing what we expect it to. And I'm super proud to say that we now have a completely custom workforce planning model, which is working really well for us. And we have so much more details. And it's a funny story because we actually, as I said, took a step back and started to think about the process, and we realized that for FP&A to be able to be the best possible business partner, we need the full details. We need to be able to really calculate down on an individual level what happens if this person moves from this cost center to this one. What happens if this person moves from Stockholm to New York? What happens if we close this office, move all these people to this office instead, etc., etc. Now we can do that. We can answer questions we just couldn't before, which just meant that we are just a much better business partnering, which means that we have much higher level of trust from our stakeholders, and it just means for better experience for everyone in general. Next step was an OPEX planning model. Quite simple, but what we did here is that we just thought, okay, so we want the full P&L in Anaplan. That's the end goal. The OPEX is of course important, but not as important as the Westwood plan. So what we did was that we created quite a simple model in Anaplan. We connected it to Power BI. We connected that to our ERP system, and now we can do cost tracking in Power BI, fully automated. So quite a small project, but still a massive win for us. And then we move on to something that is very close to my heart, because it's one of the projects I've been spending a lot of time on quite recently, which is a fund performance / revenue forecasting model. And I think for those of you not super familiar with the private equity industry, there's something called carried interest, which is basically how much of the profit in a fund does EQT earn. And that is quite a complex calculation to get to that. It's not just as simple as we get X%. So what we did is that we took a step back. Again, you see the theme that there's a lot of thinking involved before you actually start building the models. And what we did was that we thought, how can we give the business line controllers, so the people actually working actively with managing the funds and the portfolio companies, a tool they can use every day to run what-if scenarios, while leveraging the same engine, the calculation engine, and have an automated budgeting tool for FP&A. So that is basically what we wanted to do. And then we started designing, we started building, and today we have a model that can do exactly that. So super powerful. And we actually had a live demo of this for our, top management, CEO, CFO, etc., just a few months ago, where we, live in the meeting, just pulled up Anaplan, create a new scenario, pushed a deal 6 months later, decreased the micro of another deal, increased it of another one, just a hypothetical scenario, click the button, and then we just show the results in a matter of, 1 minute. And we basically got standing ovations. It was something, super unique they hadn't seen before. And it's something that saves us massive amount of time, both from a business line control perspective, but also from the FP&A perspective. And then, of course, we integrated this with our source data. So we feed the data automatically. We know the data is always up to date in the model, but we also integrate it with our financial consolidation system to just eliminate any chance of any manual errors. And I think the next one is actually worth talking about for a few seconds as well, because Anaplan, yes, it's quite similar to Excel, but it's not Excel. I think that's fair to say. It's different. And there is a certain competence needed, both from a developer's perspective and, our own tech competence, but also from the end user perspective. If you have an FP&A team of about 10 people, as we are, it's really important that everyone knows the model. Everyone feels comfortable with the model. Everyone, knows what's happening, so we can, look at the outputs and feel comfortable that this is exactly what we want it to be. So, we had a general upskilling of the FP&A team, loads of training sessions, both with tech, but also with the HR people who's going to be in the workforce planning model, the business line controllers who are in the fund performance model, but also just general cost center owners who's going to do their budgeting, the OpEx model. Well, then, of course, we have the tech perspective, where we needed to find who's actually going to build in Anaplan. And believe me, we've tried all different setups. We've had a bunch of employees. We've had on-site consultants. We've had off-site consultants. We have had project teams from different companies coming helping us. And we just did, trial and error. What is the best fit for us? And today we have a setup where we have a combination of employees, which are, super competent and really, really good and knows everything about all our models. And then we have off-site consultants, which are just, adding that really, really niche competence. So now I think we have a super, super strong setup and can really deliver models in a fast pace. So, talking about how Anaplan actually did transform decision-making at EQT. And in this case, mainly through the budget process. But I think, as I've said many times, it really helped us become a so much better business partner to our stakeholders, with the main point being that we can answer a question we just couldn't before. Detailed question about what happens if this deal doesn't close the way we thought it would. What happens if we hire these 5 people in this office instead of this one? It's just super easy to create a new scenario, run the analysis, and then we have the output in literally seconds. It's just super, super simple, and it's made everyone's life so much easier. Again, we can be confident that the same logic, same forecasting logic, the same assumptions are used throughout the business. There's no risk of having, different models and, did we update the salary increase assumptions in all Excel files? No, it's all in one system. And if you don't know what the assumption is, go in and check it. It's visible for everyone. And of course, that means we can trust the data in a way we just couldn't before. And again, data in is super important, but now we can really trust, and FP&A can own the data going out of the model in a way we just didn't feel comfortable doing before. We have a faster budgeting process. It's less stressful, and we actually have higher quality with more details where required, and in some cases, actually less details. So it's really, 100% tailored to how we want to do it and what fits our business. And we can now do what-if scenarios related to core business decisions much, much faster, less effort, and of higher quality. Again, because the logic is validated, it's systemized. It's not an Excel file. It's really been signed off by someone who knows it should be that way. So super, super powerful. And I guess if you want to take that to the extreme, it means we can, make more money for our investors and for ourselves. And of course, all of this also massively increased the collaboration. We now have a much better relationship with HR, who are the ones doing the kind of operational workforce planning, even though we own the forecast. our business line controllers, we can work together with them and look at the output of the fund performance forecasting model. But also just in general, whenever we present material to a stakeholder, it's just so much quicker. It's higher quality. And if they ask us to change a number, we can do it in seconds. So starting to wrap up now, talking a bit about what was the output of all of this. So if you talk about the fund performance forecasting, I was talking to one of the main business line controllers the other day, and I just asked, hey, I'm doing this presentation. Do you have some numbers I can show? And he literally said that a scenario analysis that previously took 4 hours now takes 5 minutes. And I asked him to is that really the case? And he was like, yes, because before you had to, go in and find the analysis you actually want to do. Then you needed to find an Excel file that is doing this calculation. If there is one, if there isn't, take that times 2. Then you needed to create a copy of that. You needed to enter the new assumptions, which you hopefully got from someone. Then you needed to take the output, put it into a new Excel file, copy paste the baseline, which is hopefully up to date with the latest exit forecast. Then you need to do the analysis, take it into a separate, PowerPoint and create slides. What we do now is just one button, add a new scenario, change the assumption, done. The baseline is always up to date, the calculations are always correct, and you have the output in predefined formats and slides. The workforce planning went from 2 people doing the entire workforce planning for all of EQT, about 2,000 employees. I think we were closer to 1,900 at this point in time. And now we have more than 70 people working simultaneously in our workforce planning model, sharing the effort. Everyone is doing what they should be doing, not more, not less. But FP&A can still own the process, we can own the data, and we can own the outputs. And then finally, we have one single source of truth for the entire budgeting process. And I mean, this is a massive gig, just knowing where all the values are coming from. But also having, as I said before, less effort, higher quality, and more details where relevant. So, I mean, it's really a win-win-win-win, I guess. And then just my last slide, I just want to say a few words about what we kind of are doing outside of the FP&A scope. So obviously FP&A is the main owner of Anaplan and the main user, but we also have a bunch of other models, smaller. I think if you look at our budgeting landscape, it's about 5 or 6 models, but then we have probably, 10 beyond that are tailored to specific use cases. So we do some deal financing calculation where we calculate which financial vehicles to use whenever we buy a company or bridge loans, etc. We do workplace ESG, where we both collect actual ESG numbers and then we can convert them to also actual consumption numbers in terms of energy, electricity, water, waste, etc. to convert that into CO2 equivalent to see what our carbon footprint from our offices are. We have tailored real estate business. I mean, real estate is just a beast of its own. So let's just leave that for now. Global firm, tax calculations, super important to ensure we can be compliant with everything. Operational finance, our fund operations team have a bunch of small Anaplan models, anything from reporting financials to validating metrics. And then we also have some fund-specific models, a model that is tailored to a specific fund, a fund that might have come with an acquisition, a fund that might be something we want to try out to see if we want to do it in our new standard. So then we have some I think 3 or 4 specialized funds models that are tailored to one use case. And I think that's everything I had today. Thank you so much. Happy to take any questions if there are any.